She grew up behind palace walls. Marble floors. Silent corridors. A life everyone admired. But what lived there was not loud. It was quiet. And almost no one truly saw it. Behind the palace walls, the world moved slowly. Time did not rush there. It echoed. Every footstep sounded deliberate. Every word was measured before it was spoken. From the outside, the palace looked magnificent, timeless, unshaken by the ordinary worries of life. Inside, it held a quieter truth. The princess was born into this stillness. From her earliest days, she learned that silence was not emptiness. It was expectation. It was tradition. It was the space where one learned to observe rather than speak, to listen rather than ask. She was taught how to stand, how to smile, how to greet without revealing too much of herself. These lessons were not cruel. They were inherited, passed down gently, as if they were acts of care. And in many ways, they were. She was deeply loved. Her parents made sure of that. But love in the palace came wrapped in restraint. Hugs were brief. Praise was subtle. Emotions were acknowledged but rarely explored. The crown demanded steadiness, not vulnerability. As a child, she accepted this world as normal. She believed everyone lived this way. That everyone learned early how to fold their feelings neatly and place them aside when duty called. She played alone often, not from loneliness, but from habit. Her imagination became her closest companion. She noticed things others overlooked. How the guards changed shifts at the same time each day. How the sunlight reached certain windows only in the early morning. How her mother's expression softened when no one was watching. How her father grew quiet late at night, staring out over the gardens as if searching for something unnamed. These observations shaped her inner world. As she grew older, the palace grew louder with responsibility. Lessons multiplied. Schedules tightened. Advisors began to speak to her not as a child, but as a future leader. Words like duty, legacy, and continuity entered her vocabulary before she fully understood their weight. She listened carefully. She always did. Outwardly, she became exactly what was expected. Calm, polite, thoughtful, reliable. She spoke with clarity and moved with purpose. People praised her maturity. They said she carried herself well. That she was prepared. What they did not see was how carefully she guarded her inner life. Behind palace walls lived a quiet story. One written not in speeches or ceremonies, but in unspoken questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I feel when I am not performing a role? Is there space for softness in a life built on strength? These questions did not trouble her openly. They waited patiently. Her closest bond was with her mother. In private moments, when the day's obligations were complete, they sat together without ceremony. Sometimes they spoke. Often they did not. Silence between them felt safe. In those moments, the princess learned that love did not always need words. Her father loved her deeply, but differently. He saw her as both daughter and future. His guidance was steady, sometimes firm, always rooted in responsibility. He wanted her protected from mistakes, even from her own uncertainty. His intentions were good, but intentions, she learned, could still feel heavy. As adolescence arrived, so did awareness. She realized that her life was observed not just by those within the palace, but by the world beyond it. Every appearance mattered. Every gesture could be interpreted. Privacy became rare. And yet, it was during this time that something unexpected began to grow. It was not a sudden romance. It was not dramatic. It was a connection formed quietly, almost unnoticed at first. A presence that felt different. Someone who spoke to her without rehearsed respect. Someone who listened, not to respond, but to understand. This person existed outside the core of palace life, yet close enough to understand its rhythm. Conversations began simply. About books. About the world beyond the walls. About thoughts she had never said aloud. For the first time, she felt seen without being evaluated. This unsettled her more than she expected. She did not rush toward it. She was cautious. Years of discipline had taught her restraint. But the connection lingered. It followed her into quiet moments. It softened the edges of her days. It made her wonder whether the life behind the walls could expand rather than confine. With this awareness came tension. She knew what was expected of her. She respected it. She did not want to disappoint her family or disrupt the balance they had protected for generations. But she also recognized something else. That denying her inner life would not strengthen her role. It would hollow it. The palace sensed change before it was spoken. Advisors noticed her growing thoughtfulness. Her responses became deeper, less scripted. Not rebellious, just honest. Questions were asked gently. Was she feeling pressure? Did she need rest? Support was offered, but within familiar boundaries. No one yet addressed the quiet shift directly. At night, she lay awake listening to the distant sounds of the palace settling. She reflected on the generations before her. How many had lived full lives within these walls? How many had silenced parts of themselves in the name of continuity? She did not want to break tradition. She wanted to live truthfully within it. The turning moment came not through conflict, but through choice. During a public address centered on unity and future vision, she spoke with clarity, but also with warmth. She acknowledged responsibility, but also spoke of empathy, of listening, of leadership shaped by understanding rather than distance. Her words resonated, not because they were radical, but because they were real. Afterward, conversations followed behind closed doors. There were concerns, of course. But there was also pride. They saw that her authenticity did not weaken her authority. It strengthened it. Slowly, space was created. Not everything changed. The palace remained the palace. Tradition remained tradition. But within those walls, something softened. Dialogue replaced assumption. Trust replaced fear. Her relationship deepened, not as an escape, but as a grounding force. Love did not pull her away from duty. It anchored her within it. It reminded her why service mattered. Her family adjusted in their own ways. Her mother smiled more freely. Her father listened longer. Understanding grew where silence once stood. Behind palace walls, the quiet story continued. But it was no longer hidden. It did not need to be loud to be real. The princess stepped fully into her role, not as a symbol alone, but as a human being shaped by care, reflection, and love. She learned that leadership was not about perfection, but presence. Not about control, but connection. The palace still stood tall, unchanged to the outside world. But inside, a life was being lived more fully. Behind palace walls lived a quiet story. Not of rebellion, not of escape, but of becoming. And that quiet story changed everything.